Guys, our long wait is almost over. Week 0 is upon us. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that Week 0 is not the official start of the college football season, just an appetizer to the main course. But nonetheless, we have games that actually count this week. I personally am very excited for Kansas State, Iowa State. We'll be locked into that game. And before you know it, we'll be one weekend away and college football will officially be here. Truly, truly a beautiful time. Welcome into the Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 1025 The Game. Make sure, before we go any further, make sure that you're subscribed to the Game Nashville Sports Network podcast. It is there where you will find each and every episode of the Air Raid with Parker Kelley. And also, please make sure that you're following me on the socials at Parker_Kelley10. Enough time with that. We have a jam-packed, loaded show. I have some bold college football playoff predictions. I'm going to remind you of my conference championship game predictions as well as winners. And I have my one and only PK's college football playoff bracket prediction. I've been looking forward to this for a while, but since we have games on the horizon, and just in case Kansas State or Iowa State, either or, were to make the college football playoff, I wanted to get out ahead of the curve and go ahead and lay out my prediction for how I think this season will unfold. I also have some quarterback news down in Knoxville, Tennessee. They have named a starting quarterback. I will get into that. I have some fall intel and an Alabama season preview. And also, I have thoughts on this idea of a 24-28 team college football playoff. I have some strong thoughts, but I've saved that for the end of the show. All right. I'm going to remind you, because I've already done a show on this, I'm going to remind you of my conference championship game predictions as well as winner. Because like I said, I believe it was a few shows back that I did this. But just in case that you did not happen to listen to that episode, I'm just going to provide a reminder. So for clarity of context for when I reveal my college football playoff bracket. Okay, in the ACC, I have Clemson over Georgia Tech. I'm very high on both of these teams this year. I think Georgia Tech will be in the mix for that ACC championship game. In fact, I predicted them to make it. So if they are playing in the ACC championship game, that means that they are one win away from the college football playoff. So they're certainly in the mix for that as well. But I have Clemson over Georgia Tech, so I think Clemson will be the ACC champion in 2025. In the Big 12, this was the toughest prediction that I had to make. But I have Arizona State over Texas Tech. The margins in the Big 12 are so incredibly slim. That's why we all love watching the Big 12. One of the most entertaining conferences to watch. Texas Tech, I am sky high on this year. I've done several episodes in which I've talked about Texas Tech being a dark horse for the college football playoff. And if they were, in fact, to make their first ever Big 12 championship appearance in school history, that would mean that they are also one win away from the college football playoff. But I think Arizona State will win it once again, and I have Arizona State winning the Big 12. In the Big 10, I have a rematch of last year's Big 10 championship in Indianapolis. I have Penn State and Oregon, except the results are going to be flipped this time. I think Penn State is going to win the Big 10 in 2025. I'm going to get to that a little bit later, so I don't want to talk about that, at least right now. In the SEC, I have LSU over Texas. I'm also sky high on LSU. I believe in the talent that they have coming back, especially at quarterback. I believe Garrett Nussmeier will be the first quarterback selected in the 2026 NFL draft. I am sky high on his ability. I like what LSU did in the transfer portal, bringing in the number 1 ranked transfer portal class. They've been stacking good recruiting classes on good recruiting classes. And I believe that in year 2 under defensive coordinator Blake Baker, who came over from Missouri, Defense has been the thing that LSU has struggled with, but they made major improvements to last year's defense. Granted, the defense was not great. It wasn't even really good, but it was so much better than what it had been 2 years ago. And I think it will be leaps and bounds, at least from what I've heard, from what I've read. I think this LSU defense will be in the mix for a top 20 defense this year. And if that pairs with the offense, I think it's good enough to win the SEC. So I have LSU over Texas. Now, here is the difficult part of the show. I've been thinking about my playoff bracket for the last couple of days, because that's what I do this time of year. So I'm going to lay out my college football playoff bracket. So Penn State, they win the Big Ten. So I'm going to have Penn State as my number one team in the college football playoff bracket. Now, before I go any further, I just want to suggest that we all put ourselves in the place that it is December of 2025. We have reached the end of the college football season, and now the committee is going through these teams, deciding who gets these at-large spots. And I want you to imagine that you already know the results of the 2025 season, and we'll go from there. So I have Penn State as my number one team. They get the first automatic bye. My SEC champion, LSU, I believe they will be the 2 overall seed. And just a reminder, in this version of the 12-team college football playoff, we are straight seeding. So it makes a little bit more sense from that standpoint. So LSU will be my number 2 team. My number 3 team, I have Texas, the opponent of LSU in the SEC championship. They are my number 3 team. At number 4, I have the ACC champion, Clemson. So those are my top 4 seeds, and they all will receive first-round byes. Penn State at 1, LSU at 2, Texas at 3, Clemson at 4. Now, let's go through the rest of the list. So I have Penn State. They will play the winner of the 8 versus 9. And my 8 versus 9 matchup will feature the 8 seed, Ohio State, and the 9 seed, Georgia. I have talked about Ohio State. I have talked about, yes, they were the national champion last year. However, they had a lot of players drafted on both sides of the ball. They lost a lot of returning production. They bring back some great players, Jeremiah Smith being the leader in the clubhouse in that category, Caleb Downs, who's a first-team All-American at safety. They have Cody Simon at linebacker, Noah Igbinosun at corner. They have some offensive line pieces that were there last year. So there are clearly some pieces left over, but they lose a large chunk of production that they have to backfill. Now, here's the good thing about Ohio State is Ohio State is an elite program, and they have no problem bringing in talent. So I see Ohio State being in the picture, in the mix this year for the college football playoff, but I don't see them as a team that is going to win the Big Ten, and I don't see them earning a first-round bye, so I have Ohio State at 8. And then obviously Georgia, who I just said would be at 9. Georgia, I'm still very confident in because until proven otherwise, they're going to be right in the mix each year with Kirby Smart. I just have concern. I won't label them as concerns. I just have questions. Stetson Bennett, how good is he? We don't know. In the SEC championship game, he came in and he didn't play lights out, but the team really rallied around him and played for him, and they ended up coming from behind and winning that SEC championship game against Texas. So how far does that get Georgia? So that's why I have Georgia slated at 9, and Ohio State at 8, Georgia at 9. They would play Penn State. The winner would play Penn State in the next round. And I hope you know that I'm going to put this out on Twitter once I finish reading it off. I'm going to put this out on Twitter so it's more easily visible instead of you just listening to me talk about it. Okay, now moving on to LSU, who is my number 2 seed. They will play the 7 versus 10 matchup. At number 7, I have Alabama. to me, I don't see many worlds in which Alabama does not make the playoff this year. So I have Alabama at number 7, and at number 10, here's my first surprise. I have the Oklahoma Sooners at number 10. I went back and forth on this one, and shout out David Janes for helping me finally decide, because I've said on a previous podcast that I think Oklahoma or Florida, one of the two, not both, but one of the two, will make the 12-team college football playoff in 2025. I could easily see this being Florida. But here's the thing. Is DJ Lagway healthy? Because if DJ Lagway is healthy, Florida has a chance to win every game that they have on their number 1 rated strength of schedule. The problem is he's been injured twice this offseason, so there are injury concerns there. Also, Oklahoma, they have the 3rd highest rated strength of schedule, but I am very sky high on John Mateer. I think he will be a Heisman Trophy finalist at the end of the season. And I think that you pair an offense who has John Mateer and will be throwing to a guy like Deion Burks, and John Mateer's offensive coordinator and Ben Arbuckle coming over from Washington State and bringing his quarterback. Therefore, John Mateer doesn't have to learn a new offensive scheme. I think that is going to do wonders for that offense. And I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I am drinking the Kool-Aid on Oklahoma this year, and I have very little concern about that defense under Brent Venables. So I have Oklahoma at 10. They will play Alabama, and the winner will get LSU in the next round. Moving on, at number 3, Texas. They will play the winner of the 6 versus 11 game. At number 6, I have Notre Dame. I'm very high on Notre Dame's defense. I'm very high on their offensive line. Obviously, they have one of the best running backs in the country in Jeremiah Love. That wide receiver room is very improved. The only problem is we don't know who the quarterback is going to be, and I'm actually going to discuss that on my next podcast, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But I have Notre Dame at 6, and they will play the 11 seed, who is Arizona State. Arizona State, they win the Big 12, and they make the college football playoff for the 2nd year in a row. Despite losing Cam Scatterbo, they returned a lot of production, and I believe they backfilled in the transfer portal and the players that they already have on the roster to find a replacement for Cam Scatterbo. Although nobody can quite live up to what Cam Scatterbo was for Arizona State, it might be a running back by committee type thing, but they also have Jordan Tyson at wide receiver, who's projected to be a first-round pick. Sam Levitt returns at quarterback. I trust the offensive line. So I have Arizona State at number 11. They will play Notre Dame, and the winner of that game will play Texas in the next round. Now moving on, Clemson, who is my 4 seed, will play the winner of the 5 versus 12. At number 5, I have Oregon. In this scenario, I predicted them to lose the Big Ten championship to Penn State, so it only makes sense that they are in the 5 spot, because the loser of the Big Ten championship is not going to be incredibly down in these ratings. So I have Oregon at number 5. And my group of 5 team, Boise State. The Broncos are back in the college football playoff. They will play Oregon, which they played Oregon, I believe it was week 2 of last year. So they will get a rematch in the first round of the college football playoff, and they will take on Clemson. So just going to go through this one more time. Penn State is my 1 seed. LSU is my 2 seed. Texas is my 3. Clemson is my 4. Oregon is my 5. Notre Dame is 6. Bama 7. Ohio State 8. Georgia 9. Oklahoma 10. Arizona State 11. Boise State 12. The winner of Ohio State-Georgia will play Penn State, and that first-round game will be in Columbus, so Ohio State will be hosting Georgia. In the 7 versus 10 matchup, it'll be Bama hosting Oklahoma, and the winner will go on to play LSU. Texas, they're my 3. They will play the winner of the 6 versus 11. Notre Dame will be hosting Arizona State. Can you imagine Arizona State, a team from Tempe, Arizona, going into cold weather in South Bend in December? Ooh, just gets my juices flowing. So they would go on to play Texas, and then I have Oregon hosting Boise State, and they would play Clemson, and that is my 12-team college football playoff bracket prediction. I will have this out on Twitter later today. It'll be more easily consumable, I'm sure, because you'll actually be able to see a bracket, and I'm sure this will go over well for everybody who doesn't agree. But, hey, this is what preseason predictions are all about right here. All right, when we come back, I wanted to address the news out of Knoxville, Tennessee, that a starter at quarterback has been named, and I also had some follow-up thoughts on the University of Tennessee signing with Adidas as their apparel brand. You're not going to want to miss what I have to say. You're listening to the Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back into the Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Listen, that was a spicy first segment, but I had to get out in front of the curve because Week 0 is here. College football is right around the corner. Had to get out in front of the curve, give my predictions for the 2025 season. It is time to lock them in. And I'm sure for those of you that disagree, I'm sure this is going to go over real well. But like I said, just wanted to put my predictions out there and lock them in for this upcoming season. Okay, big news out of Knoxville, Tennessee yesterday as the University of Tennessee and head coach Josh Heupel officially named Joey Aguilar the starting quarterback for the Vols for their season opener against Syracuse on August 30th. Lots of quarterback news has been going down today, and I'm going to address more of that in the next episode I do, which will come out on Wednesday. Remember, we are now going to, at least for the time being, 3 shows a week, going to be pumping out content left and right, so make sure that you are subscribed and you're following on the socials for that. But yes, Joey Aguilar was named the starter in Knoxville for the 2025 season. Josh Heupel has been very pleased with how Aguilar has performed in fall camp. The Vols did have 2 scrimmages. The first one, according to reports, did not go very well for the quarterbacks. However, Joey Aguilar in the second scrimmage looked a lot better, looked a lot more comfortable operating the offense, the decision-making, the accuracy, both things that Josh Heupel pointed out. And I think this is a huge credit to Joey Aguilar, who came into Knoxville late April, early May, after the news that Nico Iamaleava was going to leave Tennessee and transfer back home to UCLA. This is a huge credit to Aguilar because it is basically like speed dating when he found out that he was going to be attending the University of Tennessee for his final season of eligibility and how quickly he had to learn the offense. I made it very clear when I was talking about this quarterback competition that I thought Jake Merklinger had a leg up on Joey Aguilar for one reason, and that being that he was the most experienced quarterback in the room in terms of running the offense, because it is now Jake Merklinger's second year on campus in Knoxville. Obviously, there's another quarterback in the room, George McIntyre, who is a true freshman, who has been on campus since December. So even he, although being a true freshman, had more experience in terms of running the offense in practice and being able to be in the film room, dissect the offense a little bit more. But I think this is a huge credit to Joey Aguilar, who came in right away, put his head down. One of my favorite things about this situation is you didn't see much on social media from Joey Aguilar. Joey Aguilar came in right away, put his head down, went to work, learned the offense as quickly as he could, and to be able to win over Josh Heupel's approval to run the offense, it's a testament to what Aguilar, the work that he has put in thus far. Here's the thing about Joey Aguilar that is a concern, and that is the interceptions that he has thrown over the last couple of years. Now, I'm going to go year by year based on what he did at App State. So in 2023, which was his best season for the Mountaineers, he completed right under 64% of his passes for over 3,700 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. He also added 249 yards on the ground and 3 scores. Set multiple school records for that season at App State. Also believe he set a couple of Sun Belt records. I'll have to go back and check. But the 10 interceptions is a little bit alarming. Going to 2024, the completion percentage dipped significantly to just under 56% for 3,000 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. And I looked this up, and Joey Aguilar led the FBS in interceptions among starting quarterbacks last season. Here's the thing about Josh Heupel's offense and what he expects from the quarterback. The quarterbacks that Josh Heupel has had, think of Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton and Nico Iamaleava last year. There's one common theme, and that's that they do not turn the football over. Hendon Hooker in 2021, 3 interceptions. Hendon Hooker in 2022, 2 interceptions. Joe Milton in 2023, 5 interceptions. Nico Iamaleava last year, 5 interceptions. So what this tells me about Joey Aguilar is that he has taken care of the football, at least in practice. And that is something that he is going to have to do on the field for the Vols this year, because if the quarterback is turning the football over, this offense obviously does not work the way that it was designed to work. So that is something that he is going to have to cut down on. Here's the good thing about Joey Aguilar, that Nico didn't necessarily have. Joey Aguilar, from what I've seen, is a gunslinger. He takes shots down the field. He is aggressive. And part of being a gunslinger is you make explosive plays. There are plenty of explosive plays to be made for gunslingers. But you also run the risk of turning the football over. Nico Iamaleava didn't necessarily have that same gunslinger mentality. Josh Heupel, think about what he was able to do with guys like Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton. Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton, respectively, were not able to keep their starting jobs at Virginia Tech and Michigan. They struggled to keep the starting job. They came to Tennessee, and Josh Heupel got the absolute most out of them that they possibly could. Turned Hendon Hooker into a Heisman Trophy candidate in 2022 when at Virginia Tech, he couldn't keep the starting job. Joe Milton, the same way. We've been talking about Joe Milton, his big frame, his big arm, all the physical attributes that really impress you. He struggled at Michigan. And Josh Heupel worked his magic and had a good season with Joe Milton. Not great, but good. And he ended up getting both of them drafted. Now Hendon Hooker is up in Detroit playing for the Lions. Joe Milton is the backup for Dak Prescott in Dallas for the Cowboys. Joey Aguilar now comes in, a transfer from App State and UCLA. Struggled with interceptions his 2 years playing FBS football. Josh Heupel, I believe, is going to be able to get the absolute most out of a guy like Joey Aguilar. And I think that Joey Aguilar at his best is probably a little bit more capable of converting deep shots as compared to Nico Iamaleava. Nico Iamaleava really struggled with overthrowing guys or just flat out missing. So we'll have to see how things go in 2025, but there is a level of optimism that Josh Heupel, based on what he has done in the past, can get the most out of a guy like Joey Aguilar. So it's certainly exciting. So I also have more thoughts on Tennessee's deal with Adidas. I talked a little bit to Ryan Shumpert on the last episode about this. It was one of the worst kept secrets in the country. This has been talked about for a while, but the news finally broke late last week that Tennessee was going to go back to Adidas after switching to Nike at the end of the 2014 season. Now they're going back to Adidas, and the details of this deal have not necessarily been disclosed yet, but there was a number that got leaked, I guess, that Adidas would be paying Tennessee around $10 million. I also saw $20 million annually. Adidas is wanting to make Tennessee their flagship school. Danny White, who's the athletic director at Tennessee, this is a no-brainer for him. You go where you're wanted. Adidas wants to make you the flagship team of their brand, and after they offered a deal, Nike, who is contractually obligated to offer a rebuttal type deal to try to negotiate something, they didn't even want to negotiate after Adidas made the offer that they did. I read an article from Ross Dellinger over at Yahoo Sports about this being the start of an arms race in college football, and I think he's absolutely right. This is the start of an arms race to find who can legally circumvent this new salary cap in college athletics. And Tennessee, once again, is out in front of the curve. We saw that Tennessee was one of the first schools to offer a competitive NIL package to a high school recruit in Nico Iamaleava when he was coming out of high school in Southern Cal. They offered him the $8 million contract, the $2 million annually. They were out in front of the curve when they took down the NCAA after they tried to come after Tennessee for quote-unquote illegally recruiting Iamaleava. And then they were out in front of the curve again when they decided to tell Nico that they were not going to pay him more money, which ended up in him leaving to go to UCLA. So Tennessee has been out in front of the curve quite often on a lot of these issues. And at the beginning of an arms race where the salary cap was introduced this year, $20.5 million is what schools are allowed to allocate to their athletes across campus. Schools are going to start trying to find a way to legally circumvent this salary cap so that they can get better athletes and try to turn that into wins on the field. And this is Tennessee's way of doing that. And I believe it's brilliant. There was a line in Ross Dellinger's article over at Yahoo Sports. If you haven't read it, I highly encourage you to do so. There was a line in his article that said, quote, partnering with an MMR, aka a multimedia rights deal, or an apparel brand is likely the best way for schools to exceed the cap without falling under that fair market value standard. So those are going to be the two ways, Ross Dellinger reports, that schools are going to try to legally circumvent this new salary cap. And he mentioned a couple of teams that have their apparel brands expiring after this last year. I believe LSU was in there. He included Texas, Georgia, Oklahoma. There are a lot of schools out there that have their apparel, whoever sponsors their apparel, those brands are expiring soon, and it can be another case study to see what happens. Do they sign a new deal with another apparel brand? What happens there? Does Nike step up to the plate and offer more money? Who knows? But this is just a glimpse into the future of what teams are going to be doing in order to find a competitive edge that is legal. And I really think it is a brilliant move on Danny White's part, the athletic director at the University of Tennessee. Okay, I have some fall camp intel that I absolutely have to get to. We'll get to that on the other side of the break. Coming up next on the Air Raid with Parker Kelley, you're listening to 102.5 The Game. Welcome back into the Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 102.5 The Game. More fall camp intel, and also we're going to get back to our team preview series. Let's go down to Tuscaloosa. Alabama running back Jam Miller suffered an upper body injury in a scrimmage on Saturday and is expected to miss the August 30th season opener at Florida State. So massive news coming out of Tuscaloosa. Here is the optimistic point of view. Yes, the timetable as of right now is uncertain, but from what I have read so far, I believe that Jam Miller will be back by the early portion of the regular season, maybe not too long after the Florida State opener. Also, another optimistic point of view, this provides opportunities for other guys in the room. Jam Miller was expected to be RB1, one of the leading returning rusher from last year's squad, with Justice Haynes transferring to Michigan and with Jalen Milroe being drafted by the Seattle Seahawks in the 3rd round. So Jam Miller was expected RB1, but this provides opportunities for some of the younger guys in the room. Sophomore running back Richard Young, who had 146 yards last year rushing and 2 touchdowns. Daniel Hill, who is another sophomore, 61 yards and a score last season. And Alabama also brings in Louisiana transfer Dre Washington, who had 478 yards last year, 5 touchdowns, averaged 6.5 yards per carry in 2024. So those guys are expected to get a 3-way split of the carries, and that provides opportunities for someone else to step up. And that is one of the beautiful things about college football. Obviously, you don't want to see anybody get injured, but there's this next man up mentality, while until Jam Miller comes back from his injury, someone else is going to have to step up. And there are 3 capable bodies in the room who can do that. So we'll have to see how that plays out. So let's go ahead and talk about Alabama, what we should expect from them in 2025. The preseason AP poll came out, and Alabama was ranked number 8. Is that a fair ranking? Is it unfair? I had Alabama in my top 6 in my initial preseason ranking. Ty Simpson was recently named the starting quarterback at Alabama, and I'm very, very happy for Ty Simpson. Taking my media hat off for a second, putting my fan hat on, Ty Simpson was a guy that had several opportunities to leave, as it is now year 4. He's a redshirt junior for the Crimson Tide, had several opportunities to leave, could have left when it was easy after the greatest coach of all time decided to retire and move to media, and you don't know who's going to be your next head coach. It would have been very easy for a guy like Ty Simpson to leave, but he decided to stay. He decided to stick it out. He stuck it out last year, and now I think he's being rewarded by, one, not only being named QB1 for Alabama, which is a huge honor in and of itself, but you also got to remember that Kalen DeBoer has reunited himself with Ryan Grubb, who is back as the offensive coordinator at Alabama. And I believe Ty Simpson, based on what Ryan Grubb wants to do schematically, is more of a fit for the offense than a Jalen Milroe. Now, Jalen Milroe was fun to watch, very electric athlete, great deep ball thrower, but I think Ty Simpson, yes, he's not the athlete that Jalen Milroe was, but I believe he's still very talented. I mean, we're talking about a former 5-star recruit in Ty Simpson, and I believe that he's going to mesh and fit into Ryan Grubb's offense beautifully, and I cannot wait to see how it plays out. And not to mention, let's look at the receiver room and who he has to throw to. Ryan Williams, does that name ring a bell? One of the greatest wide receivers in college football last season. And I don't think he's 17 years old anymore, so that's a plus as well. Jeremy Bernard, who was a transfer from Washington at the beginning of last season, followed DeBoer over to Alabama. They have Isaiah Horton, who is a transfer from Miami. I'm going to get to him in just a second. Offensive line, going to be pretty solid. Parker Brailsford is back at center, was also one of the guys that followed DeBoer from Washington to Alabama. Caden Proctor at left tackle. Despite all the weaponry on offense, I think defense is going to be the calling card under second-year defensive coordinator Kane Womack. They have guys like defensive end LT Overton, linebackers Justin Jefferson and Deontay Lawson. You're going to want to remember that name, Deontay Lawson. Corners Xavier Brown and Damani Jackson. Safety Keon Sabb. They're all back for another year in Tuscaloosa. Now, I do have some concerns about the depth at defensive line, but if those guys are able to stay healthy, this defense is going to be something to be reckoned with. They brought in some key transfer portal additions. Again, I mentioned wide receiver Isaiah Horton from Miami. They go out and they get a tight end, Brody Dalton from Troy, who replaces Amari Niblack, who left to go be the tight end at Texas A&M. They go get a guard from Texas A&M and Cam Dewberry. They go out and they get another corner from Utah, Cameron Calhoun. So some key transfer portal additions for Alabama. Now, if we're taking a look at the 2025 schedule, according to ESPN's Football Power Index, Bama has the 10th toughest strength of schedule in America. And you remember my stat that in terms of strength of schedule, the 1 through 11 hardest strength of schedules in the country all belong to SEC teams. Alabama has the 10th toughest strength of schedule. Obviously, Florida State, who they open with week 1 on the road, Florida State's a complete wild card. We don't necessarily, we don't really know what to expect with them. They have Gus Malzahn at offensive coordinator, and they got him from UCF, and they also got Nebraska's defensive coordinator, Tony White. So we'll have to see how things go for Florida State. They're a complete wild card, but if Florida State happens to be a pretty good team this year, that could be an exciting week 1 game, or it could also be a blowout. We don't know. Wisconsin in week 3, they get them at home, so a pretty notable non-conference game. Alabama has 2 of them against power opponents. At Georgia, September 27th, that's the game that a lot of people have circled. Now, what's important to know is Alabama has a bye week between the Wisconsin game and the Georgia game, so they will be fully rested by that point. However, it is on the road at Georgia at night, 6:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC. Georgia has not lost a home game in a long, long time. I believe their last loss, I'm blanking on the year, but it came against South Carolina. So, going to be a tough road environment. Then, after the Georgia game, Vanderbilt, October 4th. When was the last time you heard me say Alabama has Vanderbilt circled on their schedule? Never. But after last year's events and after the events of the offseason regarding a certain quarterback named Diego Pavia and an appearance on Bussin' with the Boys, I guarantee you Alabama has that game circled, and that is going to be, they'll view it as their get-back game. They're at Missouri the following week. They have Tennessee, 3rd Saturday in October. That is at home. They're at South Carolina. Williams-Brice, one of the most underrated, toughest environments in college football. They have LSU, Oklahoma, and then they end the season at Auburn. So pretty tough strength of schedule for Alabama. I'm really looking at that Georgia game. I'm looking at that South Carolina game on the road. South Carolina, that was a game last year when they played Alabama that they believed they should have won, and they were knocking on the door. I have that game circled. Also, the LSU one. Going to be very interesting because that is in Tuscaloosa, and I believe that LSU is a legit national championship contender this year, and also the Oklahoma game because I've also been very high on John Mateer. But the good news is that Alabama gets 2 of those 4 games at home. So we'll have to see what happens. But in terms of odds, Alabama has the 6th highest odds to win the national championship according to ESPN Bet at plus 1,000. They have the 3rd highest odds to win the SEC at plus 425. And I also looked at this. Ty Simpson has plus 2,200 odds, or 2,200, to win the Heisman Trophy. So lots of expectations around Alabama. There should be. There should be in year 2 under Kalen DeBoer. Going to be really exciting. I can't wait for that week 1 game at Florida State. I'm looking forward to that game for many reasons, because I believe in Alabama this year, and I also want to see what Florida State is, because they are a complete wild card of a team. One more segment to go here on the Air Raid with Parker Kelley. Yes, I heard the news that the Big Ten has proposed a playoff expansion. I'll get to that on the other side. You're listening to the Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Final segment here on the Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Yes, I did see the news that the Big Ten has proposed to expand the college football playoff to 24 or 28 teams. So Big Ten executives have basically been thinking about this idea. It's very early in the stages, but they presented an idea of a 24 and 28 team college football playoff. Basically, the model would be 7-7, 5-5-2-2. 7 automatic bids allotted to SEC and Big Ten. 5 automatic bids allocated to the Big 12 and the ACC. 2 to your group of 6 champions. So what Boise State was in the 12-team playoff in the first year of the 12-team playoff, and Notre Dame. And also you get 2 at-large bids. No, I'm sorry. It's 2 spots allocated to your group of 6. So it could be 2 group of 6 schools and then 2 automatic bids. And I believe Notre Dame is protected by this as well. So granted, this is in the early stage, so nothing official, because we know the SEC and the Big Ten control the future of the college football playoff starting in 2026. I believe this idea was presented to Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference. Let me collect myself, because I'm on air. I don't want to say something I should have. I hope all the expansionists out there understand that this is part of the repercussions of when the playoff expanded in the first place. Now, I've said from the very beginning that if you are a loyal listener of this podcast, you know that I've been against expansion from the very beginning. I never wanted 12 teams. I was fine with 4, would have maybe been fine with 6 or 8, but once they decided to expand this thing, they were never planning on stopping. We went straight from 4 to 12. It was a drastic jump. They didn't even consider going to 6 or 8. And then now, after 1 year of being at the 12-team playoff, they've made some seeding changes for the 2025 season, which we all agree were much needed. But now they're talking about 14 or 16 teams before a second year of this 12-team playoff has even happened. And now we're getting news that the Big Ten has presented an idea of 24 or 28-team playoff. And I saved this for the end of the show because, honestly, this kind of even thought doesn't deserve an entire segment because it is just flat out idiotic. I have a mind-boggling theory. Some of the best decisions that are made actually don't involve making the most money. Sometimes you can make a really great decision without lining your pockets and without putting a little bit more money in your jeans, you know? So that's what this is. That is what this is. When the playoff expanded, there are people behind the scenes who realize that they could make a little bit more money. And there's a little bit more money on the table, and they want to get part of that chunk of change. So by expanding the playoff, they reason to believe that if we expand this playoff, there's more money involved, therefore I get richer. Let me present an idea to you. How many decisions in this sport are actually made with, 1, the players, the people that are actually playing the sport that we all love, and 2, the fans? The reason that some of these people are rich because the fans contribute to viewership numbers, therefore increasing revenue. So if you're not making decisions with the fans, you know, having the fans in the back of your mind, then are you really trying to keep viewership? Are you trying to keep those people loving college football? Because I don't think I've met a single person that's in favor of this. this 24 or 28 team playoff because it's just flat out ridiculous. And to be honest, it's stupid. So that's really all I have to say. Sometimes the best decisions that are made don't involve making more money. It's really simple. Greed can lead to disaster. I didn't want to end the show on such a sour note, but I had to save this for the very tail end of the show because, to be honest, it really did not deserve an entire segment. Here's the good news, though. It doesn't have to end. This show does not have to end on a sour note because there will be another episode out on Wednesday, and we're going to keep this thing rolling. 3 shows a week throughout the entire college football season, the greatest time of year. Be sure that you're subscribed to the podcast on the Game Nashville Sports Network. You'll never miss an episode of The Air Raid with Parker Kelley, and you'll never miss an episode of all of our great podcasts that we're doing here at The Game. And also, please follow me on the socials at Parker_Kelley10 because I will have content dropping left and right that you're not going to want to miss. In the meantime, take care, and we'll talk to you again on Wednesday.